Today we're going to be talking about what I would do if I was starting from total zero with playing solos on the guitar. I think this is a super duper important thing to talk about because a lot of people make tons and tons of mistakes from the beginning, including me. And that's going to be the first thing that we're going to talk about is sort of the mistakes that I made. And then we're going to talk about how to fix those mistakes, what you should be practicing, what you shouldn't be practicing. And then we're going to talk about the right mindset that you should have to approach learning to solo on the guitar. So, mistakes. Okay, I made tons of mistakes. And the first mistake that I'll say that I made is not learning the notes on the guitar fretboard. This is like honestly the stupidest mistake that you could possibly make. Like, it's unbelievable how many people do this when it comes to learning guitar. I don't understand. Like, I really need to figure out before I die, how can I get it so that people actually learn the notes on the guitar fretboard. Okay, I didn't learn them until I had been playing guitar for like 8 years. Okay, I mean, to me, that's completely asinine to be playing guitar for multiple years and not knowing the notes on the guitar fretboard. So another mistake that I made is not learning solos and songs all the way through. So I would just kind of learn little riffs here and there, just learn these kinds of things and not learn the song all the way through. That is a really, really big mistake because now you're not going to be able to actually play the solos that you learn with other people, right? You're not going to be able to use it in the situations that you want to be in. We want to have this mindset of being complete through the end of whatever we start. Okay, so now the last mistake I want to talk about is just using shapes to play your solos and thinking that the shapes and the notes are the key to playing our solos, okay? Now, learning shapes and notes is definitely important. Even when I was just talking about learning the notes on the guitar fretboard, it is important. But none of that stuff is going to matter if you don't have one critical ingredient. Can any of you guess what that ingredient is? I've talked about it before. It's rhythm. Okay, so if I play, for example, my A minor pentatonic scale, and I just go, I mean, that doesn't sound like anything. But if I go, now that sounds way better. Why? Because it actually had a rhythm, had a solid tempo to it, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Everything that I played was related to that grid of time. And that's super duper important and way more important than the notes that you play. You can play notes that are not in the A minor pentatonic scale, and they're still going to sound good. I'm not going to get super into that because that's something that I've talked about before. Okay, so now the next part of the video is going to be what to practice. Number one is you should learn the notes on the fretboard as soon as possible. As soon as possible. I have a free guide on how to learn the notes on the guitar fretboard. You can check below after you're done with this video. Use that, learn the notes on the guitar fretboard, okay? Now, as far as how to practice it, first of all, that guide talks about how to practice it, but we will talk more about that in a second. With that being said, when you learn the notes on the guitar fretboard, you're actually learning a scale. So you're learning the natural notes first, and actually all that comes from the C major scale. So some of you probably heard this, like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Okay, so that's a scale, and we use that to learn the notes on the fretboard. But what we need to do is we need to know what scales are even for. I actually talked to someone the other day who showed me, hey, I've been learning this scale, this pentatonic scale. He shows me this pentatonic scale. And he goes, yeah, I just learned that. And, I asked him something that he wasn't able to answer. So I asked him, do you know what the reason is behind knowing that scale? And he couldn't answer the question. And I go, don't you think it would be important to answer the question? Like, why would you even learn this piece of information? What's it for? So when I was first starting out soloing, I thought that scales were kind of like a way of being able to exercise our technique, basically. So I thought that if you play through this scale really fast, that it's going to teach you how to alternate pick or whatever it is, and then that's going to enable you to have better technique, and that's going to enable you to play riffs, play other solos that maybe somebody else came up with, etc., etc. That is not what scales are for. A scale is essentially like a set of colors. If you go to an art store, I'm not, much of a visual artist. I'm not a visual artist at all, actually, but I know that I've gone a few times to the art store and seen they have different sorts of sets of paints. So they might have a set of paints that's more fall colors that are darker, like dark green, dark brown, those kinds of colors that you could paint a fall like landscape with. And then they might have another set of colors that's more like pastel colors, right? Very spring types of vibes. So a scale is the same sort of idea. It is a set of notes that's designed for you to be able to make music from, okay? So how do you make music from it? Well, you make decisions based on two things. Number one, what rhythms you're going to play. Okay, I'm going to put that in number one because that is more important. And then number two, which actual notes out of that scale are you going to play? So you don't just play the scale in order all the time. That's what people do at first, and that's what I did, is just play the scale up and down. But instead, even if you just changed the order and played nice and slow, played some quarter notes. Now, all of a sudden, I actually just made some music, right? I changed the rhythms and I made decisions based on what notes I want to play. I didn't just play them up and down verbatim, skipping around, not playing some of the notes, playing some of the notes, etc. So it's sort of a vehicle for you to use to make music, because you know that all of those notes are going to sound good together. Sort of like how the color set, the pastel colors, they're all going to look nice together because they all have the same sort of vibe. Or the fall colors, they're going to look nice together, right? It might look weird if you take pastel colors and mix them with the fall colors. So that's what a scale is for. They're for improvising, not exercising, okay? So that brings us to the third point here, which is knowing the most fun and effective way to practice your soloing and practice your scales. So playing your scales up and down like that, because it's not super musical, you shouldn't spend a lot of time doing it. You should only really spend time doing it right in the beginning, when you literally have never learned a scale before. You just found out, you didn't even know this was a thing before. Okay, pentatonic scale, cool. I need to learn where all those notes are in that scale so that I can sort of get a clear picture of it in my head. But as soon as you get that clear picture in your head of where those notes are, you got to start practicing in the most fun and effective way, which is this: playing in time and playing over a drum track, ideally, actually. So because I've been doing this a while, I can play in time when I'm playing by myself. But most people, when they're first starting out, including me, you're not really going to be able to play in time by yourself. You could try it, but the best way to play in time is going to be just putting on a drum track. And I like the idea of the drum track instead of using a full-on backing track. Of course, you can do that too, by the way. You can go on YouTube, pick a backing track. But that's sort of going to introduce some more complications. There's going to be chords going on. There might be different sections of the backing track, and not all the notes are going to sound the same on all the chords, and that's sort of going to open up a whole nother can of worms, right? But if you just throw in a drum track, now you can groove, and you don't really have to worry about how each note is going to sound that you're playing. You don't need to worry about things clashing with chords underneath. So I take a pentatonic scale, and I'm going to put on a drum track now, and I'm going to use that to improvise. So now I'm playing notes outside of the pentatonic scale, right? And it's not going to clash. Look. So I'm showing you that because I don't sit there like by myself just going, okay, time to practice my scales. Okay, let me do this for an hour. No. Practice making music with the stuff as soon as possible. And this applies whether or not it's a scale or whether or not it's chords or whether or not it's anything. Take it and put it in time right away. So I really wish I would have done this starting from zero because my rhythm would have gotten better. And on top of that, it would have just been more fun and I would have wanted to practice more. Okay. So that brings us to point number 4, which is that you might still feel a little limited when you're doing this. Okay. So you're not going to be able to make it all up on your own. Okay, that's just the reality. So just like how when you learn a language when you're a kid, you don't just make up all the sentences on your own. You read books, you read short stories, you talk with other people. So it is important to get vocabulary from other great guitar players. So I'd recommend starting from zero. Learn some simple but really good solos from other guitar players. So one that I really recommend is actually the solo from Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana. That solo, super duper good solo for you to learn right in the beginning, because now you're actually seeing what does it take to make something that's musical. You see the notes that are being used in a different order. You see the different rhythms happening. It's getting you to memorize something and be able to play it. So then you can start to, if you're paying attention, extract some of the ideas from those solos that you're learning and then put them into your own solos. Even something like the rhythm. You know, that one, it goes da 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 da. So I might just take that rhythm and I can apply it to like my pentatonic scale. So if you notice, that actually had the exact same rhythm as that Nirvana solo, and now all of a sudden it helped me get a better basis for ideas in my own improv. Some other suggestions I have for you is learn the solo from Californication by Red Hot Chili Peppers. That's a pretty easy one. And then also the solo from Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd. That one, you play that one on acoustic, but it's super, super cool. And now you're actually learning from the pros. So then when you go back and do the stuff that we just talked about, playing, improvising your own material, now you have a little bit better of a basis for like selecting rhythms, selecting your note choices, being able to skip around that scale, and see what that's going to be like. With that being said, we're just got a couple more here. Number 5, once you've started to do all that, you started to become comfortable with your scales, you comfortable with your notes, you're comfortable with playing in time, playing over a drum track, you've gotten a couple of solos under your belt. The next thing you need to do is learn how to solo, not with scales, but with arpeggios. So if you listen to a lot of solos, there's something about them. It's like, why does every note just sound good? And the reason is oftentimes because of what we call chord tone targeting. Now, if you don't know what that is, it's very simple. If you're playing over a chord progression, let's say the chord progression C to G to F to A minor. It could be anything. Whatever the chord progression is, if you play the notes from those chords, when the chords happen in the backing track, it's going to sound good. So if I play a solo over that progression, C to G to F to A minor, I can actually play the arpeggios, which is just all the notes from those chords but separated. So now it doesn't sound like a scale, because a lot of people, after they've been even doing all the stuff that I've talked about for a while, they complain, it still just sounds like I'm running scales. I'm running scales. I'm running scales. So the answer is, don't play with scales. Play with chords. So we can't get super into it right now because it's going to be a whole entire can of worms to open up. But learn your major and minor triad arpeggios all over the guitar fretboard. And then whenever you learn a chord progression that you want to solo over, you look at a backing track and the backing track says it's this chord, this chord, this chord, this chord. You got to know all those arpeggios all over the entire fretboard. So if your backing track that you just looked up or you just made says that it's a C chord to a G chord to F to A minor, well, you better make sure that you know all your C arpeggios, all your G arpeggios, all your Fs, and all your A minor arpeggios, and that you can sort of switch modes between those. When the C chord switches to the G chord, your mindset shifts. Okay, now I'm shifting from my Cs to my Gs, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I hope that makes sense. When you're on a certain chord, you can play the notes from that chord. You can also play the scale, the general key that it's in, but the chords give you a way different perspective on how all those notes sound, and it just teaches you to get right to the notes that are guaranteed to sound good. Those notes in the chords are always guaranteed to sound good, even if you don't necessarily know what they're going to sound like yet, which that is a goal later on when you start getting really advanced, is be able to hear what you're playing. I've talked about that before too in videos, but you want to be able to just guarantee that you know you're going to get the right sounding notes every single time. So last thing is sort of what we talked about before, is practicing your rhythm. And when I say practice your rhythm, I mean practice rhythm by itself. Can you play a solo with just one note and that uses a lot of different interesting rhythms? So can you do that and keep it in time the entire time? You need to be able to do that. Rhythm is its own thing. You got to practice on its own. Just like how we sit there and, well, I'm trying to get you not to do this, but a lot of people practice just the notes by themselves, not in time. Of course, that's what I've been advocating for this whole entire video is when you're learning about notes, learning about scales, learning about chords, practice them with drums, practice them in time. So we combine those two ideas. But Rhythm should be something that you practice on its own, completely separated from notes. This is what drummers do all the time. People like to make fun of drummers. Oh, drummers don't know anything about chords. They don't know anything about notes. But drummers will sit there and play rhythm all by itself because they don't have to worry about notes. Well, guess what? That's super valuable for you as a guitar player, as any instrument that uses any instrument. Any instrument I was going to say that uses notes, but of course they all use notes except for drums. You know, these types of just percussion instruments that don't have pitch to them. Make sure that you are practicing rhythm by itself. Find different rhythm exercises. I have the ultimate rhythm exercise. I've talked about that in my videos before. So practice rhythm by itself because rhythm is king. So we'll just talk about overall the arching theme of this is that you got to have the right mindset. So approach all these things in this step-by-step manner in that order that I just talked about. But with that being said, the right mindset to have is you got to just relax, okay? Whether that's in the long term or the short term. So whenever I'm trying to do this video right now, I used to get really, really nervous when I would do these videos. You know, I'm a little teensy-weensy bit nervous right now, but it's going to make me perform a lot better if I just relax. Hey, there's nothing really to be nervous about, right? So a lot of times when I practice guitar, I feel like, man, this is this thing I get in my head. Guitar's just this hard thing. Like, it's just hard, and you need to try really hard. Well, once you practice enough, you cross this threshold where you don't need to try really hard. You need to relax as much as possible. And once you cross that threshold, trying really, really hard is actually not going to help you at all. It's going to actually hurt you on the other hand. If you are playing like a super easy solo like that, like the Smells Like Teen Spirit solo, but I'm still like trying to pick it super hard and all this, it's going to actually make me probably make a mistake, even though I know how to play it really well. Just having the wrong mindset will actually make me mess up. And just be patient. This is a lifelong journey that you're starting towards. Okay, so I wish I would have known that when I was starting from zero. It's just, hey, there's not going to be some magical point where you're 100% happy with your playing. I've heard a couple of people say, oh yeah, I'm 100% happy with my playing. I don't believe them. And if they do actually genuinely feel like that, usually they're sort of deluding themselves. Usually when I hear them play, they're not actually that good. You know, as soon as you start telling yourself, yeah, I'm the best and I don't need to get any better, you're going to start going downhill really fast. So I'm certainly nowhere near where I want to be. I've done a lot of stuff. I've gotten a lot better, and I am happy with a lot of the things I have done in my guitar playing, but there's certainly lots of things that I still have yet to do and that I want to improve at, and that's that I've been playing for 19 years. So that's the awesome part about it, right? Is that you're never gonna get bored. There's always more stuff to learn. With that being said, with the learning the notes and learning all the stuff we talked about, the scales, the arpeggios, and the rhythms and all that, I have my flagship course, the Jamsville GPS Fretboard Fundamentals course, which you can find over on jamsville.com. Talks about all the stuff that you need to master the guitar fretboard so that you can figure out exactly where you want to play all over the entire guitar fretboard, soloing on any chord progression. You can figure out the arpeggios to the chord progression. You can figure out what key it's in. You can figure out how to find the notes in that key, whether it's a minor key or major key, all over the guitar fretboard in the best, most solid way that's going to stick with you for life. So that's going to be the end of this video. Until next time, listen, learn, and jam.